Hey everybody, what's up? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris and this is.
Cheryl, hello everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about Whisper of the Heart. And spoiler alert, we're going to get into it, like talk a lot of details in the film. So if you haven't seen it, click away, come back later after you've seen it. And without anything else, let's go ahead and get into it. So I love this movie, Cheryl, and I that's why I recommended it for you to watch. But tell me, this was your first experience watching this movie, a Studio Ghibli film, but not directed by Hayao Miyazaki. What did you think?
I was pleasantly surprised. It was a little weird for me because I guess it didn't really fit the movie formula, so to say. So I didn't really know at what point I was in the movie, and I didn't know like what to expect or what is going to happen because it was basically about it was a love story, but it was also about so many other things. And there was no like moment like where we're pushed into a threshold where something else happens and the characters are on this journey that they have to solve something that they figure out at the end. It's just kind of like the life of a bunch of young people who and their relationships with each other. So I actually thought that was kind of a fresh of breath air. It was a little slow, but it was still like interesting enough for me to be captivated by what was going to happen. And I was constantly asking like, well, what's going to happen? Like, what is going to be the thing that drives their actions, and what's the conflict going to be? And there were little pieces of conflict, but there was no one big conflict that was driving the story. So that was
Right.
that was pretty cool. Actually, I enjoyed that, but I didn't appreciate it until the end because I was just like, "What's gonna happen? What's going on? Like, when is the story gonna kick off?" And I think about like halfway through, I was like, "I think this is the story."
Halfway through, you start to realize what it is that you're actually watching, and yeah, those conflicts that you talk about that come up in the movie, many of them are solved really quickly. Those minor conflicts, like the one about Sugimura liking the main character Shizuku, that is basically solved within the first 30 minutes. There's first 40 minutes of the movie, and it's like almost a 2 hour film, you know? And then Sugimura even goes to her friend Yoko, or I think it's Yoko, and immediately apologizes for the whole misunderstanding and tells her that he'll tell his friend that it just won't work out, and then that's done, and then it's behind us. So it's strange, but the movie almost kind of plays out more like literally like a slice of life. It is a moment in time, and it's nothing spectacular. It's actually mainly about the inspiration that allows this person to then do the thing that they want to continue on doing.
Yeah, I definitely thought that was cool. They touched on schooling, and that's kind of like one of the big issues that I think needs to be solved or addressed in uh like our community. It's just like you know um there was this quote that her dad says, which is it's never easy when you do things differently than everyone else. And I was like, wow, that's so true because, us being filmmakers, it has been a struggle to try to break into the film world, and we realize a lot of things, and it doesn't mean that we failed, but it was definitely challenging to try to make your way through that life that is different from what most people do. Um, and like the thing about school is that it's one size fits all, but one size does not fit all. When you want to go to trade school, like he wanted to learn how to make violins, not
Right.
necessary to play them, but to craft them. That's like something completely different. Like, what if you want to be a glass blower, or, you
Hmm.
know, like there's so many different things that doesn't really fall into the structure of the school system. And that's a big issue that I think is really eye-opening in this movie.
Yeah, and I don't know. Do you remember the second part of that quote? Because I wrote that quote down too. So the first part was that he says that it's never easy to do something different than everyone else. But the second part is that, and if things don't work out, you have no one to blame but yourself. And I was like, oh man, like I took that to heart because like you said, we're creative people, and particularly with me, I'm a writer, and that's why what this movie speaks to me so on such a deep and passionate level, because I relate to the main character, and this movie is really about the artist's struggle. They talk about how artists never think that they're good enough, and they never think that they can do it, and they are always like, how can I get better? And it's that constant struggle and constant challenge to push yourself, but then also at the same time, how do you pursue a dream in a society that doesn't necessarily support the pursuit of those dreams on a I guess on a structured level, like the level that of how the schooling works and the system that they are within. So, and the system that we are within, like even though the story takes place in Japan, that doesn't mean that the schooling is that much different than how we look at schooling here in the States. So that was something that I found to be very interesting for my own personal growth as a creative individual and as a writer. And I really respected that, and I can get behind that. I can get behind the idea that, you know what, if it doesn't work out, sure, that's on me. But guess what? That means the opposite is also true. That if it does work out, that is also on you. And that's what I love. I love that message.
It did like sting a little bit because my main profession is not in film like set out to be, but also it brought us here where we're doing the show right now, that
Mm,
I guess it's kind of eye-opening because you realize things that you didn't know that you wanted, and you don't really figure that out until you try to do it. But it
right.
doesn't mean that you can't be happy, I guess you could say. And
Mm,
I don't feel like I I guess I did for a little while, did blame myself for not succeeding, like I wasn't good enough. But then you just kind of figure out, like, we realize that we would rather do something like this with each other, and have fun and actually enjoy the work that we do, as opposed to working in the glamour of Hollywood, where you just get bossed around all the time, and it's very unlikely that you get to make like a movie like The Avengers.
not unless you're lucky, but yeah. And I found this movie refreshing in a couple of ways. So you mentioned how you found it refreshing and how the structure wasn't the normal film structure when you're watching the movie, and it also goes down to like the protagonists and what their interests are. Like you said, the main male protagonist, Kenji, he doesn't want to play violins, he wants to make them. That's very different. And most of the time it'd be he'd be, and they even have a great sweet scene where he plays the violin, and the main character Shizuku, she sings, and then his grandfather comes in and they play. And in a traditional movie, he'd want to be a he'd want to be able to play the violin in front of like Carnegie Hall or something like that. But that's not what he wants to do. He just wants to make them. And the main character, her interests are a little bit more cookie cutter. But even how she starts, it's not. She's writing song lyrics for her friends, and then that eventually transitions her into the reality that, wait a second, I think what I want to do is tell stories. And so then she chooses and makes the decision that she wants to be a writer. And I think one of the greatest things about that that arc is that they both start off so bullheaded, and they're going to do exactly what they want to do, and they're going to make no compromises. High school doesn't matter because this is all they're going to do. But by the end of the movie, they realize that, and I think that's their arc and their growth, but they realize that, you know what? There's still time for this. We still have to get better. We're not bad. We're both promising. We're not there yet. I'm a promising violin maker, and you're a promising writer, but we both have to polish. We got to polish the rock until we become a gem. And after we do that, then we can be where we want to be. But to get there, we do need school. So we're both going to stay in school right now, and then we'll see where life takes us.
Very true. I do want to talk a little bit about the romance side of the story, because it is a little bit like, there's a lot of
That's true.
stuff about like the love square, which I thought was cool, because it's so real. Like, stuff like that happens all the time in real life. And I think one of the things I really appreciated about this is that it wasn't so heavy on the romance. It wasn't about like the guy fawning over the girl or the girl fawning over the guy. Actually, there was almost no fawning at all. It wasn't about that. And I thought it was really cute. The scene you were talking about earlier when she was singing and he was playing the violin. That was one of my favorite scenes, because I was like, oh, they're like legit connecting and everyone's just having a good time and they're having fun, and it's like so raw and real and innocent, and it was just a really sweet moment. And like the other thing that kind of like crushed me, because it was all too familiar to me, was when he basically told her that he's gonna go to Italy, right when they're like, just about to start dating. And something like that kind of happened to me before, except for like it didn't, it obviously it didn't work out, um but like, stuff like that happens, like that is not uh a rare thing. That happens all the time to people, where you meet someone but they end up having to follow their dreams and take the course somewhere else, and they have to decide whether or not they want to choose what they love to do or be with someone that they might love.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes you can get lucky enough to have both, but sometimes you don't. You don't get to have that. And in this particular story, it worked out for these two characters, but I thought it was also interesting that she was giving a character, Sugimura, so much crap for the fact that he was dense and that he didn't realize that this girl, her best friend, liked him, and she was getting upset. Like, how could you not know? And then he comes out and he's like, but I like you. And then and it turns that conversation on its head, because now all of a sudden she's like, wait, what? No, I wasn't expecting that. And he says, how could you not? It's like they actually have the exact same conversation with one another, but the perspective is what changes how they connect to that situation, where she thinks it's obvious and he doesn't. But then once it's about him, he thinks it's obvious and then she doesn't. And I thought that was also very true to life too, because it shows you that when you're the one that's involved, you can't really see it all the time. And it really takes someone looking from the outside, and when they're looking in, they're like, how can that person not see what I see? But you're looking from the outside in through a window, while the other person's in the house and they're not looking out that same window, so they don't see anything of what you're seeing. And it's just so I thought that was very interesting. And another part that I really liked about their relationship of Kenji and Shizuku was at the end of the movie. It's such a little scene, but it makes all the difference for me, is when he tells her to get on his bike and he decides to go, and he wants to go up that steep hill. And of course, the message, the symbolism is that no matter how hard he has to climb, he's going to climb and he's going to carry her with him. And she's like, who told you that you could decide that? and she jumps off the bike and she starts pushing, and she's like, I'm not going to be a burden to you. If you're going to climb a hill, I'm going to help you. And then when they get to the top and they're looking out all of Japan and they're having this moment together, he says, I'm going to be a professional violin maker, you're going to be a professional writer, and we're going to support each other. And it's kind of like the ideal image of what a relationship can be, and I think that's what makes that scene and that ending, even though I think the ending almost kind of, the movie almost kind of like just cuts off, but it makes that so much more beautiful, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I actually wrote down that we can't read each other's minds. So to
Right.
go back to that part when they were talking about each other being dense and how she's like, "Oh, I'm the dense one." It's like her realization that like, "Oh, we can't really tell what other people are thinking, and that's why like communicating what you really think and how you really feel is so important." And like, people aren't gonna like if you like someone, they're probably not gonna know unless you like be like pretty dang obvious.
Yeah.
Like just say it. But yeah, I also really felt that the part with when she was pushing his bike up the hill and they were doing it together. Like that's what relationships are. Like you work together and you do things together, you grow together, you work on things together, you support each other, and like they're super young and they got it going good already. They didn't even have a date yet.
Right.
And then at the I was really like, what? When he like at the end he was like, "Do you think like we might be married one day?" And then she's like, "Well, yeah." And then he's like, "I love you." And I was like, "Okay, that's a little over the top there, but it's also like
Mhm.
they're kids. It's cute."
It is, and even he has a moment where he says that thing that you said about the whole marriage thing, and this line made me laugh so hard. He asks her, he says, "Is that corny?" And she says, "It is, but you're not a writer." And I was like, "Oh my god, so good." So I was willing to excuse a lot of that because yeah, they're kids, but then also because they call attention to it. It's like, hey, I'm a writer, and the main character, she's a great character, but I also really loved the family dynamic. I wanted to ask you about that a little bit too. Like, what did you think about the family in this movie?
I thought it was really I mean there were a lot of changes. First I was like, oh, the
Hmm.
mom is very absent, but then oh, she has a big sister who is kind of acting like the mom. Um
Right.
and I feel like the family changes a lot over time. And
Hmm.
at first I thought like they were so chill until they had that conversation with her about her grades and going to school. And I was really surprised that her dad was and her mom ended up agreeing too that she didn't have to go to school if she didn't want to. Um,
Hmm.
but I can see why they would do that because it is a little true where like you don't necessarily need school for every single thing, although I feel like she does needs that track of school for writing. Um,
Right. Probably
but
just at least high school.
yeah, yeah. Um, that I could agree on, but only because of the way that society works, where you just kind of
Hmm.
need that education to be considered for anything. But I don't necessarily believe that you learn what you need to learn, or like not everything at least. There's some basic stuff that I think you do need to learn, but most of it is just junk you don't need unless you're going to be specific to those subjects. But
Right.
but I thought it was cool because I could see that they were kind of being like, well, we're gonna trust in you. And if you fail, then you fail. But at least you tried it, and that's how I feel. Like I feel like if I didn't try,
Mm-hmm.
to like do my career or have my career in film. Um, like if I didn't try that, I don't think I would be happy with my life right now. Because I would
Right.
always be looking back thinking like I wish
Wondering.
that I did it. I wish that I tried. I could have made it, but I just didn't try. But now I know that I tried and I couldn't make it all on my own.
Right. Spoken, by the way, by two people who have done a lot of education. So trust us, we're not talking out of our butts here.
We're
We like
smart. We know things.
we have done a lot of school, so we definitely we're two artistically minded people. So um, yes, I feel like we can say a little bit more on this particular topic. It's specifically related to the girl wanting to be a writer and choosing whether or not she should or should not do school. I think one of the things that supported her parents in making that or allowing her to make that decision for herself was the fact that the mother, even in that moment, says, "Hey, if I could go back, there are some things I actually wouldn't mind doing." And the mother is at that point in the story going for her master's degree, which is also very interesting. Like they make a point to like these are all things that are just little details that I feel like contribute to the world and this particular family feeling real. Like they didn't need to do that. She comes like she's in a household with two parents. The father is working. He works at a library, also a little different. And then the mother is going to school for her master's degree. The sister is kind of doing her own thing, acting as the stand-in mom, and the little girl writes song lyrics and then eventually starts writing a story about a statue that she saw in a shop that she ran into one day after following a cat. So I find that everything around, like even the details of their house is cluttered. There's books and stuff on top of books. They have to like move things aside to try and get through. And their sister, like the sisters share a room and it's a bunk bed, and one sister's clearly old enough to be living on her own. She's at least in her 20s because she went to college. And this younger sister is probably around like 11 or 12. I think she's 12 because they're about to go to high school. So, but they share a room and they share a bunk. And it really shows you a couple of things. It shows you the dynamic of the family, but it also shows you their economic situation. And I think all of that detail, even though they don't expressly call attention to it, helps to make this family feel more real. And I think it added to my enjoyment of the family and their interactions with each other.
Yeah, I almost feel like the only like because I do agree. I do feel like the family felt real. I mean, they even have this like detail about how the dad smokes,
I forgot about that.
but
Yeah.
that doesn't really like do anything but add to who this person is.
Hmm.
I think the only thing missing from reality is that the parents are still together.
Hey man, maybe that's just a family that gets lucky. This man and this woman, they found each other and they stayed with each other, and now their youngest daughter finds somebody that apparently they're gonna be with until until they're old enough to get
They're
married.
gonna get married.
So maybe that just worked out for them. But you're right. The detail about the cigarette, I think, it's a very small one, but it is another part that's just about building character. And there's one other story element that pops up in this movie that is very very small, but it's the story of the old man Nishi, the guy that owns the antique shop, and why he even has the little statue thing in the first place and what it means. And once you find out the story, it's very small. I think the story is even told in like within maybe maybe 3 to 5 minutes. But once the story is told, you realize it's a love story, and the story is about these two statues, these two people that have these statues coming together. And there's no like happy ending for that story. We never see that woman he's talking about from Germany. He
It's
says
never
that he went to find her.
resolved.
It's never resolved. He never finds her. But the point isn't in that story being completed. The point was in the fact that his story or the story of this statue can inspire somebody else to tell their own story. And that's another beautiful element about the film.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I did really like that he had that story that didn't have a happy ending because that's also part of life. Not all, it's not like in the movies where the guy and the girl get together and everything works out. It doesn't happen like that in real life. And not to say that this movie is like real life, it's just in some elements it is, and the standout is that they don't make it a fairy tale, even though she talks so much about fairy tales and wanting to like be in a fairy tale and live in a fairy tale. But that's what it is. It's a fairy tale. It's not real.
right.
And she got lucky.
She
She
got
got
so
really
lucky.
lucky. Like the rest of her classmates didn't get to be with anyone that they wanted to be with. Like her best friend and the guy who likes her best friend and his friend that is also her friend that likes her best friend.
It gets complicated. It gets
Yeah.
messy. No, but you're right. None of them get their happy ending, and yeah, there's another line in the movie that I thought was so funny because the whole part of I guess the catalyst that brings them together is the fact that he signs out all these books. So the implication is that he's been looking at her for so long. He even talks about how he used to sit down next to her and she didn't even notice him, and so he started just reading all these books so that he before her, so that that's what he would have to do to catch her attention. And you know, it's one of the things that's a little bit coincidental in the movie that she would notice this one person's name out of all these people, but I don't know, they just happen to have the same taste in books. But I thought it was really funny when they got into this argument after they sung, where he says to her, "Oh, you spend too much time reading books," and she's like, "Well, apparently you do too yourself," finding out who he was. Um, but yeah, no, this movie I thought was really great. I really enjoyed it, and it actually has a sequel called The Cat's Return, which is a Studio Ghibli film that is the actual story that she eventually writes.
Oh, okay. I think I saw that and I was like, "Hey, that looks just like the Baron."
Hmm. So yeah, so after you see this movie, then that's the next movie that you can see that's technically within this universe. But it's her story. But I think that the movie just takes place as if it's its own thing. But if you know the full story of it, then you know that this is the story that this character later goes on to create. So if it's something that you're interested in seeing, then that's the continuation of this through line. But it sounds like you really enjoyed the movie, though.
I did. It was it was it wasn't entertaining, I guess you could
Yeah.
say. It was more of a make you feel and make you think about stuff kind of thing. And for that reason I liked it and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's not the same. Like we were saying earlier, it's not the same type of movie film structure. And I feel like if any of us wrote a screenplay like this in school, they would have told us to rewrite it. But it's for whatever reason, it works for me. So, but I've said about everything I wanted to say. Is there anything else you want to bring up before we close out?
I have one thing.
Okay.
There was a Coca-Cola product placement shot.
There was in the alley, right on the ground when she was following the cat.
Yeah, and I was like, what is that about? But okay, anyway.
They gotta pay for their movie, Cheryl. Let them pay for their movie. Yo, sometimes you have to sell out just a little bit so you can have enough money to make this film a thing because it doesn't follow screenplay rules.
It just took
So,
me out of the movie. I'm just saying.
well, if that's the only thing that you have bad to say about the movie, then I think the movie did a good job. So, all right, everybody, we're gonna go ahead and cut this here. But what did you guys think about the movie? Have you watched Whisper of the Heart? Have you seen other Studio Ghibli films? What are your favorites? Whatever you think, comment below, let us know. And if while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, and subscribe, Even if you don't, though, I've been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you guys next time.